Last week I did a video talking about my very first experience watching Gundam SEED, and as promised in that, today we're talking about my first experience with its sequel series, Gundam SEED Destiny, and how I kinda loved it. Before I get into my thoughts though, I want to hear from you guys, so head on down to the comment section below and let me know what you think of this series. If you've seen it, do you think it's better than the original series, worse than the original series, do you love it, do you hate it, where do you sit on it? And while you're there, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of anime and Japanese gaming content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. So from what I've managed to garner online, a lot of people really don't like SEED Destiny, especially when it comes to fans of the original series, because it does take some routes, make some decisions, which I guess a lot of people maybe wouldn't like that, concerning where it focuses, which characters it chooses to focus on, and the plotline, all that kind of stuff. There are aspects of this series that people really don't like. But like I said, I kind of loved it. Starting off, one of the things I really do appreciate about this is that it does feel like a different show in many aspects with its own identity, but it also is still very much a continuation of SEED. The ideas, the themes, the characters, storylines, everything like that is very much brought over from the original series and implemented into here, but then you bring in a lot of new ideas, a lot of new characters, a lot of new perspectives on things, and it makes it different enough but also still very much in line with what was originally set up in SEED. And one of the new things it does is a massive risk, and I applaud any series for doing this, taking this swing and doing it right, and that is bringing a new character to be the protagonist, even though you do still have Kira Yamato, our protagonist from Gundam SEED, very much involved in the story. He maybe takes a bit more of a lead role in the back half, but especially in the first half, Shin Asuka is very much the lead character, with Athrun sort of still as a lead character in a similar way that he was in SEED. Personally, I do think that risk somewhat pays off, though like I said, definitely in the back half you can feel Kira taking a bit more of that lead protagonist role, and maybe Shin going a bit more into the background, still involved, still definitely has his own storyline going on, but I do think that at times this series kind of struggles to know who he wants to focus on, who is the lead character. Not necessarily a case of who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, but a case of whose perspective are you seeing all of this from. I think it's a problem you're always going to run into when you introduce more new characters, when you've still got a set of characters that you were using in the original series. But I think when taking into consideration everyone that's in this series, every storyline that's going on, it does a pretty good job at maintaining all of that and keeping a good enough balance. Speaking of Shin though, even though like I said, sometimes he kind of drops off a little bit in terms of how much he's focused on, I do think he is a great protagonist, and he doesn't just feel like this shoe-in for Kira. He's someone that has his own story, has his own character arc going on that I think is really well fleshed out throughout the entire series, but in some ways his story, his character, mirrors Kira in a lot of ways. Almost feels like this tragically dark version of him. I would kind of describe him as the Shadow the Hedgehog to Kira's Sonic, if that makes sense. Shin goes through so much, loses so many people close to him, whether we're even just talking about the cold open, which I gotta say was phenomenal, where Shin loses his entire immediate family of his parents and his sister in a very, very tragic scene in the battle at Orb. And you see from his perspective, you kind of have a hatred for everything. You completely understand this hatred and disdain that he has, this resentment towards Orb, towards the Alliance, towards a lot of people, towards the freedom of course as well, which he sees as the reason why his family was killed. And unfortunately that hatred and the drive that he's built up to improve himself because of that event is used to the advantage of other people, and it's a very unfortunate thing to see, because Shin is, at his core, a nice person. He's a kind-hearted person, and in many ways he is like Kira, except he went down a different path and he was involved with different people that maybe had different ideas for whereabouts he should go in his life. And speaking of those taking advantage of him, Gilbert Durandal serves as a far better antagonist than the likes of Patrick Zala and Maruta Azrael in SEED. Throughout the entire series, he comes across as genuine and sincere in what his goal is, and even as we get to the end and discover that his plans involve essentially removing free will from people, you can see exactly where he's coming from and you empathise with this idea. In fact, even a lot of the characters openly state that they understand and agree that it would bring an end to war and destruction. It is actually quite difficult to disagree with his sentiment, disagree with this idea of doing these things to bring an end to war and destruction. If people have a purpose in life, if everyone is given this destiny, this thing to strive towards, almost like a life path, if you will, then yeah, people wouldn't be fighting over certain things. People wouldn't be, fighting for resources or fighting for, increasing wealth or profits or anything like that. These, disagreements that people have, you would have none of that because people know the life, the path that they are going to have, and therefore there is really no reason to break that. It's a very interesting and deep idea that I guess could connect to something like 1984 and this whole idea of dictatorships and taking away free will, taking away the things in life that form an opinion. But at the same time, humans very much enjoy having free will. They enjoy being able to make decisions in life for themselves. So to take something like that away, it is ultimately wrong in our eyes, but when you see it from a perspective of, well, it will end this kind of suffering, it's just such like a moral dilemma to have that it's so interestingly explored through lots of different characters. Now this next point might be because Seed did a lot of the heavy lifting, but I actually found this series more emotional. I find myself more emotionally invested. Maybe you could say, okay, well, Seed built up these characters, that's why the payoff, the emotional payoff of it all works. But I found myself getting more emotional with the characters that were first introduced in Seed, whether that's Shin, whether that's Luna Maria, whether that's Mia Campbell as well. There's a lot of characters within here. Stella, for example. There's loads of characters that are introduced in this series specifically where their emotional moments to me actually hit really, really hard. I'm sure I'll touch on it more when I do my character tier list for Seed Destiny, but Mia Campbell's story is fantastic, really investing, emotionally so. Despite the many things I loved about Seed Destiny, it does have its fair share of flaws, which I guess is maybe where some of the complaints for the series come from. Starting off with something that I mentioned earlier is that some parts of the story are underdeveloped, like the extended, for example, which are kind of like these enhanced people that are being created by the Earth forces. There's that whole dilemma of, well, we're trying to get rid of the coordinators, except we are enhancing our people anyway, so we're trying to make our own coordinators. I guess, like, from a moral perspective, it's very ambiguous. It's weird to look at, which the story definitely acknowledges, so I'm not saying that as a complaint by any means, that whole idea, but it does drop that whole storyline after the Battle of Berlin, which is a fantastic set of episodes, fantastic arc in the series. But after the events of that, the extended are not touched on as much because there's no like extended characters that are heavily involved in the story from there on. So from that perspective, I completely understand it, but I definitely think it's something that should have been and could have been explored a lot more, gone into more detail, dived into it a lot more, and it's kind of sad that it wasn't because it had a lot of potential, was really interesting. Now onto my biggest complaint, and it was there in Seed, but it only really happened one time, so it wasn't a complaint as such there, and that's cop-out deaths. This series is notoriously bad for doing this. First off, they bring back Moolah Flagger under a different alias of Neo. There's no explanation as to how he survived. There's a brief shot at some point where he's having these flashbacks, all the memories are coming back. He's on a table, got all bandages all over him. That's the only exploration of him surviving. There's no explanation. But perhaps even worse, Kira gets another cop-out death, and Athrun also gets a cop-out death. Don't know whether it's really the first for Athrun or second. I'm not really sure, but this is like 3 occasions where they do a cop-out death, and it's really stupid. I think that once you do this many cop-out deaths, it removes stakes for major characters. Of course, Gundam's always going to have characters dying, but I think when you start to kill off and then bring back main characters constantly, it removes that whole like thing of stakes. But overall, despite those complaints that I just mentioned, I did love this series. I think that Gundam SEED Destiny is fantastic. In some ways, I think it's better than Seed. In some ways, maybe not so much, but I would say that overall it is about on par, and depending on the time of day, depending on the week, I will probably go back and forth over which one I prefer, because SEED Destiny has a lot of fantastic moments within it, has really great characters. In some cases, I think it's got a better like main cast of characters actually than Seed. I just think it's a great series. I think it's got a lot going for it, a lot of great ideas, most of which are explored well, some of which maybe not so much. You got a great antagonist there that you can completely see his perspective on things, and then you just have a great protagonist as well. You just have an all-around really good cast of characters, great story, and much like with Gundam Seed, it is just great sci-fi and great mecha storytelling. So with all that in mind, I'm going to give Gundam SEED Destiny a B. Before I get out of here though, please do leave a like on this video. Also subscribe if you're a fan of anime and Japanese gaming content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, head on down to the comment section below Let me know what you thought of this series. If you've seen it, are you in the camp of loving it, in the camp of hating it? You're right in the middle on it. And also stay tuned for upcoming videos. I've got a Seed Freedom review coming hopefully soon. Tomorrow I'm going to be watching that. I'm very, very excited to see it. Initial reaction, full review, all that kind of stuff coming. Other videos for Seed Destiny, such as character tier list, mobile suit tier list for Seed as well coming. Openings ranked for Seed Destiny, and I'm sure there's going to be other videos to do as well, maybe some pertaining to Seed Freedom. But if you like Gundam content, this is the place to be, because I'm going to have plenty of it coming in the near future. As always, thank you so much for tuning into mchat today. I'll see you guys next time.